The sting came before the sound did. My cheek was still ringing when I heard the room go silent. 30 relatives, forks frozen halfway to their mouths, a candle still flickering on a cake shaped like a 60. My father's hand was still raised, fingers spread, like he was deciding whether to do it again. Behind him, my stepmother wasn't gasping. She was smiling. Just barely. Just at the corners. I didn't touch my face. I didn't cry. I just looked at him and said the only thing that came to mind. You just signed something you can't take back. Nobody in that room understood what I meant. Not yet. 2 weeks later, a judge would read that sentence back to my father in a courtroom, word for word, off a transcript he didn't know existed, and watch the color drain out of his face as everything he owned was signed away in under 4 minutes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. My name is Rachel Kessler. I'm 34 years old, and for the last 9 years I've run a commercial cleaning and facilities company called Kessler Bright Solutions, which I built from a single contract, one dental office, $400 a month, into a business that now pulls in $2.3 million a year servicing office parks and medical buildings across 3 counties. I built it from nothing. No inheritance, no seed money, no favors. Just 18-hour days, a used cargo van with 190,000 miles on it, and a business degree I paid off myself, one loan payment at a time, while cleaning break rooms at midnight. My father, Gerald Kessler, is 60 years old. He raised me alone for most of my childhood after my mother left when I was 7. For a long time I loved him uncomplicated. I paid for half of his heart surgery in 2019, $34,000 out of pocket. No hesitation. I co-signed a truck loan for him in 2021. When he remarried 4 years ago to a woman named Denise, I walked him down the aisle myself because he asked me to, and I didn't ask a single question about why that felt strange. What was at risk going into that birthday dinner was $340,000. That's how much I'd quietly loaned my father over 3 years to help him get back on his feet. After Denise convinced him to invest in a restaurant franchise that failed within 18 months. I never called it a loan out loud. Called it family. I didn't have a single signed document to prove any of it. That birthday dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it was the night I found out exactly how little that word family meant to the people sitting at that table. I'd gotten to the restaurant early to help set up a private room at a steakhouse my father loved, the kind with heavy curtains and candle sconces that made everyone look 10 years younger. I was folding napkins into little fans when I overheard Denise on the phone in the coat closet. Her voice pitched low but not low enough. She was wearing a new watch. Cartier rose gold, the kind that runs $6,000 easy. I remember staring at it because 2 months earlier she told me she and my father were barely scraping by, and asked if I could cover his cardiologist copay. He doesn't even check the joint account anymore, she was saying, laughing softly into the phone. Once the house transfers into my name next month, none of this matters. Rachel can keep writing checks. She's good at that. I stood very still behind the coat rack, a stack of cloth napkins pressed against my chest like a shield. She wasn't talking to a friend. I recognized the cadence, clipped, professional. She was talking to a lawyer. I didn't confront her. I folded the last napkin, walked back into the private room, and smiled when my father came in wearing the tie I'd bought him for Christmas, and I said, "Happy birthday, Dad," in a voice that didn't shake at all. I am, it turns out, a very good actress. I just didn't know it yet. The next morning I did what I do best. I got quiet and I got organized. I pulled the county property records online. Sure enough, an application for a quitclaim deed had been filed 9 days earlier. My father's house, the one I'd paid $22,000 toward repairing after storm damage in 2023, was being transferred solely into Denise's name. I called my father, keeping my voice light. "Hey, I saw something weird on the county site. You guys refinancing?" He laughed, easy as anything. "Oh, that's just Denise handling some estate planning stuff. Tax purposes. You know how complicated that gets, kiddo. Nothing for you to worry about." Jargon. Estate planning. Tax purposes. I said, "Makes sense," and I believed nothing. 3 days later, my cousin Marcy, who'd never liked Denise and made no secret of it, forwarded me a screenshot from a group chat I wasn't in. Denise to my father's sister. Once the house is mine and the Franklin Street property closes, Gerald won't need Rachel's money anymore. He just doesn't know it yet. Don't tell him I said that, lol. The Franklin Street property. I didn't even know that existed. I brought it up at dinner gently, framing it as concern. Dad, is there a property on Franklin Street? I didn't know you two bought something. Denise answered before he could. It's a rental investment, Rachel. LLC pass-through structure for liability protection. Your father's accountant set the whole thing up. It's very standard. She said it with the practiced smoothness of someone who'd rehearsed the line in a mirror. I nodded. Oh, that's smart, I said. And I meant it in the sense that it was smart the way a con is smart when it's aimed at you. The following weekend I stopped by to drop off my father's blood pressure medication, which I still picked up for him every month without fail. The garage door was cracked open. I heard Denise's voice and my father's brother, Uncle Phil, laughing along with her. She's like a golden retriever, Denise was saying. You just point her at a bill and she fetches it. Gerald, honestly, thank God for that girl's guilt complex, because Lord knows this restaurant fiasco would have buried us. My father laughed. Actually laughed. A real one from the chest. I stood outside that garage door with a pill organizer in my hand, and I felt something in me go very cold and very clear, like a window frosting over from the inside. I hired a private investigator, cost me $2,400, cash I didn't blink at, to run a public records search on the Franklin Street LLC. It wasn't a rental investment. It was a shell company formed 6 weeks earlier, funded with a $180,000 wire transfer that traced back to a home equity line of credit taken out against my father's house. A house I had helped pay to repair. Refinanced without my knowledge. To fund an LLC that, per the filing, listed Denise as 100% managing member. My father wasn't being protected by an accountant's clever tax structure. He was being drained, quietly, methodically, by a woman who'd been counting down the months until his assets were fully hers, with my money as the safety net underneath the whole operation. I made a decision that week, sitting alone in my office with the lights off and the investigator's report open on my laptop. I was going to become the person they already thought I was. Denise had called me a golden retriever. Fine. I'd wag my tail. I started showing up to family things a little more scattered. I let my hair go unstyled. I wore the same soft cardigan 3 times in 2 weeks, a specific, deliberately unimpressive gray cardigan that became, without anyone noticing, a kind of costume. I fumbled my words when money came up. I asked my father more than once in a voice pitched just slightly too high. Wait, so is everything okay? You'd tell me if you needed help, right? Knowing full well he'd smile and pat my hand like I was a worried child. Inside I was doing math. Outside I was doing theater. If they think I'm oblivious, I told myself, they'll stop being careful. People don't hide things from someone they've already decided is too dumb to see them. I let Denise help me understand my own father's finances, nodding along as she explained fake numbers with a patronizing gentleness that would have been almost funny if it weren't so precisely engineered to keep me writing checks. I started keeping a small notebook, plain, spiral-bound, the kind you'd buy for a grocery list, and I wrote down every date, every dollar amount, every lie in handwriting that looked, if anyone glanced at it, like nothing more than appointment reminders. The notebook became my second recurring prop, right alongside that gray cardigan. Confusion was my costume. The notebook was my weapon, hidden in plain sight. I needed something no jargon could talk its way out of. So I built one. I told my father in my new soft, uncertain voice that I wanted to finally get everything in writing, just so I don't worry so much. And I offered to draft a simple acknowledgement of the $340,000 I'd loaned him over 3 years. Just for my own peace of mind, Dad, nothing legal, I promise. He signed it without reading past the first line, the way people do when they think the document in front of them can't hurt them. That was bait number 1. Now I had his signature confirming the debt existed. Bait number 2 was quieter. I asked to borrow the guest room at their house, just to sort my tax paperwork. It's less chaotic than my apartment. And while I was there, I left my phone charging on the kitchen counter during dinner, screen dark, recording app running, propped against a napkin holder like it had been forgotten. I sat through that dinner with my hands folded, asking soft questions about the Franklin Street rental. And Denise, relaxed, confident, 3 glasses of wine in, laid it all out. The HELOC. The transfer timeline. The plan to have my father's house fully retitled before his birthday, so that if anything happened to him, none of it would be considered marital or family property I could ever touch or question. Under the table in my coat pocket, a second phone buzzed once. A text from my lawyer confirming she'd received the property records I'd forwarded that morning. I didn't look at it. I just smiled and asked Denise to pass the bread. I had my birthday dinner already planned. I had my evidence. Now I just needed my stage. Gerald's 60th birthday dinner. 30 guests, that steakhouse private room. The candle shaped like a 6 and a 0. Denise stood up early, tapping her wine glass, and made a toast about new beginnings that was really a thinly veiled announcement. She mentioned, glowing, that she and my father were restructuring some assets for the future, and looked directly at me when she said, "Some people in this family have a hard time understanding boundaries around money." My father laughed along. Then, encouraged by the room, he added his own joke. The one that ended with his hand cracking across my face. "You know Rachel," he said, grinning at the table, raising his hand like he was about to pat my cheek affectionately. "She just doesn't know when to stop giving. It's actually kind of pathetic, this need to buy love." The slap landed harder than the joke, both of them at the same moment. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I stood up slowly, smoothed my gray cardigan, and reached into my bag for the plain spiral notebook. "I want to say happy birthday, Dad," I said, quiet enough that the whole room leaned in to hear it. "And I want to say a few numbers out loud, because I think everyone here deserves to know them." I read the acknowledgement of debt document first, $340,000, his own signature at the bottom, dated 3 weeks earlier. Then the HELOC, $180,000, pulled against a house I'd paid $22,000 to repair. Then the Franklin Street LLC, formed 6 weeks ago, Denise as sole managing member. Then at last I played 11 seconds of audio from my phone, Denise's voice, crisp and unmistakable, saying the words so it's fully hers before he even knows what's gone. Denise's wine glass hit the floor. She didn't drop it. Her hand simply stopped believing it was holding anything. At that exact moment my lawyer, who I'd asked to wait in the restaurant's front lobby, just in case, walked into the private room with a process server beside her, and asked to speak to Gerald and Denise Kessler regarding an emergency petition for fraudulent transfer and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, filed that afternoon. I picked up the birthday cake topper, a little plastic 60, and I set it down gently face down in the center of the table. A small, quiet, symbolic thing. Felt like closing a book. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said again, and I walked out. What followed moved faster than any of them expected. Within 48 hours, the court granted a temporary restraining order freezing the Franklin Street LLC's accounts and halting the pending property transfer of my father's house. Within 1 week, the county prosecutor's office opened a formal investigation into Denise for elder financial exploitation. Given my father's cardiac history and the pattern of asset stripping documented in the recordings and bank records. Within 10 days, Denise's name was quietly removed from 2 other family members' informal financial arrangements. Uncle Phil, embarrassed by his own laughter in that garage, admitted under questioning that he'd known about the Franklin Street plan for months and said nothing. The judge, reviewing the acknowledgement of debt alongside the HELOC paperwork, ruled that the $340,000 owed to me constituted a valid secured claim against my father's remaining assets, ahead of Denise's marital claims. Combined with the fraudulent transfer findings, the ruling effectively unwound the house transfer, froze the LLC funds pending restitution, and ordered Denise to surrender the Cartier watch and 2 other luxury purchases traced directly to the HELOC funds, to be liquidated toward what she owed. In 4 minutes, standing before that judge, my father lost the house, the LLC, and the marriage. Denise filed for divorce the same week, once she realized there was nothing left to stay for. I want to be clear about something though, because this story isn't really about revenge. When the dust settled, I made sure my father's medical coverage stayed intact through the transition. I called his cardiologist's office myself and set up a payment plan in my name. No strings, no lecture. I also reached out to the 2 employees Denise's failed restaurant had left unpaid for their final 2 weeks of work, and I cut them checks out of my own company account, $2,100 total, because none of this was ever their fault. That's the part I'm proudest of. Not the courtroom. That. 6 weeks later, on a night with sideways rain and a wind that rattled the porch light, my father showed up at my door. He'd lost weight. He was wearing a jacket too thin for the weather, no umbrella, his hands shoved deep in his pockets like he was trying to hold himself together from the inside. Behind him the driveway was empty, no truck. The bank had that, too, eventually. "Rachel," he said, and his voice cracked on the second syllable. "I have nowhere to go. Please. I'm your father." I stood in the doorway with the porch light throwing long shadows across the wet steps, and I felt, for one unguarded second, the 7-year-old version of me who used to wait by the window for him to come home from work. Then I felt my cheek phantom warm the way it had felt at that dinner. "You're right," I said quietly. "You are my father. That's exactly why this hurts as much as it does." I paused. "But I already gave you $340,000 worth of chances, Dad. I'm not writing another check tonight, and I'm not opening this door either." I closed it gently, no slam, no satisfaction in it, just a quiet click of the latch. My husband, Tom, was waiting in the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea already poured, like he'd known exactly when I'd need one. He didn't ask what happened. He just slid a mug across the counter and said, "You did the math right this time." I sat down across from him, wrapped both hands around the warm ceramic, and for the first time in months, I felt something that was almost finally quiet. Here's what I learned, and I'll say it plainly. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's just an open account, and there will always be someone willing to overdraw it. Protecting yourself from people who exploit your loyalty isn't cruelty. It's the first act of actually respecting yourself. If someone in your life has ever made you feel guilty for having limits, I want you to hear this: the guilt was never proof you were wrong. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to protect you? Tell me in the comments, I read every single one. If this story hit home, hit like, subscribe for more real stories like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.